I stayed silent for years. I survived, but silence almost killed me. Beth Jones lived that. And today's conversation is about what it takes to speak into your healing or into your growth and emerge empowered on the other side. Most people talk about healing like it's a straight path. Beth Jones will tell you the truth. It is not linear, and it's the bravest thing you'll ever do. In your pain, those feelings that we don't like, it might just be the portal to get to the other side. If you want my take is like healing is like Google Maps that's consistently rerouting, but no matter how many turns you take, you finally get to the destination. And so I'm stoked and extremely humbled that my friend Beth came on the show today to share this conversation. She isn't somebody who just talks about healing, she embodies it. This episode is raw, it's real, it's full of the kind of truth that most people in today's world are too afraid to say out loud. But Beth, she lives it, and she lives to set people free with this truth. And if you're new here, welcome to the Mind of George Show. This is the place where we get honest about what it takes to build aligned businesses and lives that are rooted in truth, integrity, wholeness, and massive amounts of success. You found the right space, and I am so glad that you are here. And in this conversation, Beth opens up about her journey from years of silence and survival into what I would consider a full spectrum power. We talk about how she transformed her trauma into a massive mission. I quote, "Why secrets create sickness," and how her heal framework helps people turn that darkness, turn those moments into true purpose and power. And this episode is designed, maybe accidentally, maybe by the gift of God, to challenge how you view your pain and empower you to use it and turn it into something palpable and powerful for you. And Beth founded her incredible movement called Empowered Survivors. She's a best-selling author, a speaker, and a recovering forensic accountant turned trauma mentor. Her first career was uncovering white-collar crime, fraud, and corruption in over 35 countries. The second mountain that she chose to climb is helping survivors heal from trauma, abuse, generational pain, and shame through authentic truth-telling, deep emotional processing, and spiritual empowerment. And I literally love this. She said this to me. I don't know what it means, but she said she's a double Scorpio, which means she was literally born for transformation. And her book is incredible. It's called Becoming an Empowered Survivor. And it's a blueprint for anyone to stop surviving and to start living. And this isn't like self-help fluff. This is the hard-earned truth from someone who's walked through deep trauma, through family secrets, through identity loss, and came out on the other side, not just healed, not just happy, but in her words, whole. And if you have ever felt invisible, you've felt dismissed, you've felt unsure how to start healing, this invitation, this episode is like an invitation back to the first step of yourself. And so we talk about at the very beginning why healing begins with brutal honesty, not bypassing it. She shares her heal process for reclaiming power from trauma. And we talk about how to turn your shadow into your superpower. And this is one of the most courageous conversations we've had on this show. And so I think it's one of the ones where we say, as Tony Robbins has people walk through the coals, let's step into the fire and let's find our way through it. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. Today, I'm excited. I get to have a friend on the show who I would submit is rewiring and restructuring the word trauma. That would be a fair way for me to do it, and empowering people to shift their life. And she is, quite frankly, a woman of many, many lives and lifetimes. And she is the founder of an incredible company and movement called Empowered Survivors. She is the healing mentor, but we're going to tell you what healing means. She has an incredible podcast called Let's Heal. Her book, she's a best-selling author of Becoming an Empowered Survivor. And not only is something she talks about, but something that she, quite frankly, thrived through. So she went through unhealthy survivorship, which we'll unpack. And she talks about helping us to hope, evolve, and love using her frameworks. And so she is an absolute gem. She is like the most curiosity inspiring woman, because every time I talk, I'm like, wait, you did what? You how and when? And that's insane to me. And so without further ado, I want to welcome my friend Beth to the show. So Beth Jones, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, George, and I am delighted to be here with you today.
I love it. I love it. And I
Yeah.
love your mission of like helping to rewire quote
Yeah.
unquote survivors from,
Yes.
dysfunctional coping patterns and the ways that which we're taught to basically cope and stay stuck with it and moving them towards like empowered self-leadership. So it's something near and dear to my heart. And I love it. And I can't wait to like unpack even how we got here. So like I'm honored to have you.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. We're gonna have a great discussion. It can be fun.
W we yeah, it already is fun, and
It
I'm gonna
is.
I'm gonna I'm gonna start I'm gonna start just to kinda kick us off because 'cause
All right.
I'm innately curious, right?
All right.
So, you are not and I love this, you are not a survivor, you are a healing mentor, right? Like, you are helping create a new path, and I'm just curious if there's anything that you've never shared before that explains why the healing framework is so deeply personal and essential to you.
Well, it's so deeply personal, because it encapsulates the process that I went through to save my own life, to heal
Mhm.
myself, to end my suffering from survivorship. I have been a survivor at moments in time when I experienced whatever trauma I've experienced, including living in unhealthy survivorship, which I think is part of the way that we traumatize ourselves, which is the worst kind of trauma that we can suffer. But we do that to ourselves. Um, and really, the heal framework is the process that I went through that saved my life, right? And it radically transformed my life. That's the other thing that's amazing to me about it. And I know that it can, it can be a radical transformation for anyone out there who engages in the process, right? I mean, it's kind of a double whammy on the radical transformation for me because personally, it transformed me from living in that place of unhealthy survivorship to where I am today, where I am thriving in my life and I'm full of a life that has a lot of joy and peace and love in it, which were three things that were missing from my life for many, many, many years. I have
Mhm.
those now. Worked really hard to get there to have them, but I've done it through the healing process and through what I now teach through the healing framework. Um, but the other radical transformation for me is professional, which I know you have some curiosity
Oh,
about that too,
I'm about to
which
ask in a
many
minute.
people do. So I did
Yeah.
something very, very different for over 30 years. And I've spent the last, probably year and a half figuring out what it means to be the healing mentor and to come into my own with really the gift that God gave me, which
Yeah.
is the work that I do now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's a lot that we get to unpack for
Yeah.
everyone here
Yeah.
listening. It's going to be a curious, fun one, but it's
Hmm.
almost like you lived a dual life. Like you were this high stakes forensic
Yes.
investigator
Yes.
and this hidden like trauma survivor, right? There was
Yes.
like this dual life that was happening. And I'm
That's
just
right.
curious, like, what was the core belief or what was the moment that first cracked that allowed you to start that healing journey?
5 years ago, and actually we are recording on July 2nd, so June 19th, which is Juneteenth, which we know is Freedom Day, is my personal Freedom Day as well, which I take a pause there when I think about what happened to me on that day and the significance of what that means, particularly here in the US, right? Socially, with our fellow Americans, right? Who
Mhm.
that day really means a lot to. For me, it was my day of liberation. It was a hard day, one of the most difficult days I've ever had in my life. I went into a hypnotherapy session um, just for sort of a benign reason and ended up going through one of the most terrifying and traumatic experiences of my life when I was under hypnosis. And when I came to, back to my conscious awareness, I was suddenly met with the realization that I had no idea who I really was. My entire life had been something other than what I had made it up in my mind to be, and really ran into this massive wall that I would go on to discover that I'd been building for 45 years at that point. And I tell people now when I met that wall, it was 45 years tall and 45 years thick. And it was full of all of my unprocessed trauma, the abuse I had suffered, and really, more than anything, my unprocessed emotions and what I had done to myself to survive. And behind that wall, I was very lonely and alone. And that was a really difficult place to find myself in because it was the reality of my life. But what I consciously had been aware of for so long were all of the masks that I was wearing, right? Everything that other people wanted me to be or that I had become because of just the path of my life and surviving. I suddenly was faced with all of that. And I would go on to learn that the vast majority of that really was not who I am at all. And I
Mm.
took most of it off. And I am now the real me who I was always meant to be is who I am today.
So would you say that like the life that you were living, is that what you would label unhealthy survivorship?
There was a lot of unhealthy survivorship in my life, but one of the things that I really like to talk about, and I think it's why my story resonates with so many people, is that, my life, I can put many of my survival mechanisms and the way I cope, the way I survive under a very broad umbrella called dissociation. Okay. And I
Mm.
literally suffer from dissociative amnesia. And I do a lot of work now to try not be in that place. But what I think has happened to me in the past, I'm void of much of my memory until 4 or 5 years ago when I started actually focusing on what was happening to me. But I think what was happening to me in those years is when I would enter a traumatic or abusive situation, and I'm even talking about like a caustic, between me and my ex-husband, whenever we would be having a conversation that was just part of our normal daily conversation, but it was painful to me, emotionally painful to me. I'm even talking about those types of daily interactions. My brain just says, yeah, we don't need to be here for this. So let's just leave. And I would just tune out. What I found happened to me over time, though, and was the problem for me, is I was carrying a lot of those emotions inside of my body because I was not letting them out. I was storing them in that wall, not processing them. And I knew that they were there, but I could never associate them back with a specific recount of events that caused them to be there, right? So that was a typical dissociation that I've suffered from for a lot of my life. One of the other ways, and this is the part that I think really resonates with people when I talk about it this way, is what I call being a busyholic in chronic chaos. And I had
Mm.
created this life that was so busy professionally for me. And what I used to do was a very, very busy, very demanding career. And I was on a skyrocketing upward trajectory in the organizations that I worked for, becoming a senior executive in the companies that I worked for, massive projects with people all over the world that I was working on, dealing with US and foreign government agencies, right? So really very chaotic, right? And this is bad stuff, right? It's like fraud, corruption, and bribery, right? So people in organizations had done things that violated laws. And so that was the environment that I was working in, where everybody is like panicking and freaking out about deadlines and trying to figure out what actually happened, right? That kind of place. That's the world that I worked in.
Mm.
In addition to that, personally, my ex-husband and I, for the vast majority of that time, operated full working ranch. And at one point in time, there were probably 120 living beings that we were taking care of on a regular basis. And it was just the two of us. And
Mm.
everything about that life, from maintaining the land, the structures, fixing the fences, feeding the animals, whatever vet care they needed, whatever it was, just the two of us. So I literally had another full-time job doing that. And so what happened is my life became so busy and so chaotic with all of these demands of what most people would say, oh, you were just climbing the ladder and just making it. My last name's Jones, which I like to joke around and say I was keeping up with the Joneses, right? Which a lot of people can identify with what that means. But the reality of that is all I was doing was distracting myself from the reality of my life, dissociating from my life through that busyholicness and chronic chaos, right? And then, the other thing I've actually been reflecting on this a lot recently is sort of God's grace of saving me from true addiction, alcoholism or addiction. And I've tried
Mm.
that to distract myself as well. And I did a lot of it to distract myself. And it's only God's grace that I didn't become an alcoholic or an addict through that. Right. So um, it's kind of, that life that everybody looked at that thought was common for a lot of people, right? What we look like in our daily life, really for me was nothing more than just, a myriad of ways for me to not even not even be not even allow myself to become consciously aware that I was suffering and the
Mm.
reasons why I was suffering, and then be able to go on and do something about it.
Okay, and this might seem really like surface level, but I'm just curious, how would you define unhealthy survivorship for everybody listening? Like for me, like what does that mean?
It's the ways in which we live our lives that cause us to stay in that place of not thriving, or if you want to say it, being a victim. It's the things
Mm.
that we do that cause us to just try to get by on a day to day basis without really or without ever focusing on the root of the problem and going and dealing with the source of what's causing us our pain and our suffering. All those ways we distract ourselves.
Got it. Got it. So like coping mechanism, but
Yes,
also like,
that's
oh,
yes.
an easy way for me to see it is like if you're in a life or in a moment, in a relationship, in a business partnership, in a job, in a hobby, in anything that you are genuinely not happy, you're almost like doing it out of obligation or just established habit or because somebody else is like, you have
Yeah,
to do this. All of that is unhealthy survivorship.
that's right. But I also think it's beyond coping mechanisms and the masks that we wear, which I think you're describing there, right? But a lot of it for me and what I realized in my own journey, and I think this is probably true for many people who are survivors of the types of things that we've survived, so much of what happens that's unhealthy, we create ourselves. And a lot of that
Mhm.
is because obviously we make bad decisions and do things that probably shouldn't be doing, right? Because we're just trying to medicate, make it to soothe our pain, right? But it's also that imposter syndrome and the inner critic, which I have suffered from imposter syndrome and I had a very, very aggressive inner critic, right? And those things also, not knowing your emotional needs, right? All of these things go into being unhealthy as a survivor, and that's what it comes from because of really and you know, you asked me sort of the pivotal point for me, and you know, I talked about, you know, the moment it cracked open is when I hit
Mhm.
the inside of that wall. But the moment that I made the commitment to myself to heal, that I was
Mhm.
going to commit and walk my healing pathway with intention and focus and do whatever it took to heal myself, the moment I made that decision was the moment that I realized that the way I was living my life was entirely because of what other people had done to me. They were my choices, many cases, and I had made the decisions and put myself there, but I was doing that out of reacting because other people had hurt me. And when I realized that, I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not dragging that with me anymore. And I want this to be over with. And that's the moment I really made the decision to heal because I knew I could. I hadn't done it. I was doing it to myself out of survivorship, but I wasn't the original cause, right? I'm not the one
Mm.
who sexually abused me, right? I wasn't
Mhm.
the one who was verbally abusing me, although my inner critic could get aggressive, but that verbal and emotional abuse was coming from other people into me.
Mhm.
And I realized that even my inner critic was it was born and began its life in my life because of what other people had done to me. And that just became completely unacceptable to me. And that was the moment that actually I remember when it happened, when I made the decision to I'm done with this. Now, it was hard work to be done with it, but
100%.
yeah.
I have so many questions. And I'm also trying to play the role of the listener and everybody listening to this right now because I'm
Mm,
intrigued.
mm,
But there's one part that you said that I wanna hone in on because I think one of the things that you talk about, these masks or these identity, right?
mm,
It's like we become this shell of ourself. We become everybody else's version of
yeah,
ourself, right?
yeah,
And we lose what I would submit is we lose ourself in that. We lose a sense of
100%.
self, right?
100%.
And I'm curious from your perspective, because I know there's people listening to this, and I'm even in this current state of my life, going through a divorce and
Mm,
transitioning, not living with my son full time anymore. When I don't have him, I'm like, who am I? Right.
mm,
So you made this decision that you're like, I'm going to heal and I don't want to be
mhm,
this version of everybody else. Right.
mm.
How did you start to find you again? Like your version, what you loved, what made you happy? Like what was that like? Because you said it's like it's not easy, but you had to kind of start rebuilding this identity. Where did you find that or create that or explore that identity?
When I talk about what the word heal means to me, it's an
Hmm.
acronym for me, to hope, evolve, and love. And that summarizes the three main essential elements that we need in order to be able to heal. The evolve part has a few subparts, but the two main ones are about the tools and resources that we use, how we get help, right? What we do to help ourselves to heal. The other part of that is about deep self-discovery. And that's where I really learned about who I am, right? And I'm still learning about who I am every day. But I'll give you one of the hardest things that I had to do, but the phrase I'm going to say is a pretty basic and common phrase. But I think if you and your listeners, and maybe even you, when I say this, if you were like me, if you really think about whether or not you know the answer to this question, do you? And the one for me that was really one of the most difficult, and I think my best example of what I went through was identifying my emotional needs.
Mm.
So when I say to you, George, can you tell me what your three primary emotional needs are? Can you answer that question? Do you know? And you can answer or not answer. And if you want, do you want to answer? Do you know?
I'm gonna be really honest. I don't think I could answer. I really don't, because my next immediate question is like, Beth, how do I find those?
So that I think is a very common reaction from people. And that was my reaction. So when my trauma therapist asked me that, I remember the day she asked me for
Like,
the
I'm
first
getting
time.
emotional because you asked that question.
I'm sorry.
No, no,
That
it's
might be a good
okay.
thing. It's a good thing, right? That's
It's
evolving.
okay, but, like, I
Yeah.
have tears welling up now, and I'm like, I don't think I know the answer to that question.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you that what I'll tell you, the problem with not knowing your emotional needs, what I've experienced is if you don't know what your emotional needs are, there's no possible way you can get them met because you don't know what you're looking for. So you think
Mhm.
about your relationships with people and you don't know what you need to have met. If you can't say what it is and know it when you see it coming to you, you can't get it met. And that's where I lived for many years because I didn't know. And it was actually a fight with my now ex-husband where the light went on for me. But that was about probably 8 weeks after my therapist first introduced that phrase to me and the concept to me. And when she said it to me, I was like, I was like looking at her like she had three heads. I was like, I have no idea what you were asking me. Like literally, it didn't resonate. I was like, I have no idea. Like conceptually, I couldn't even wrap my head around what that meant. And part of that, I think, is because I, for many years, lived in this emotionless state that I sort of described before, right? So there was all of that wrapped up as well, right? Like I couldn't even get emotions out of me, much less talk about what do I need to feel fulfilled emotionally, right? The emotional needs being met. So we talked about it for a couple of weeks and she would, go think about it and I would think, and nothing was coming to me. So one day, probably my third session where we're talking about this, she gives me this piece of paper that she says, these are common emotional needs. And so I'm looking at this paper and it's got common emotional needs on it. Which, by the way, you can go look it up. And if you go and do a Google search on emotional needs, there's a ton of stuff that will come up about what are common emotional needs, right? Acceptance is one of them, unconditional love, communication. Those are
Mhm.
my top three. But trust, you can find 50 of them easily, right? She gives me a piece of paper with all these words on it and still nothing is coming to me. So that paper sat on my night table for the next 4 or 5 weeks where I had my journal and whatever book I was reading at the time, trying to educate myself about what I was experiencing and how I had lived. Knowledge was a huge thing for me once I committed to really healing. Um, and then I'm on the phone one day with my now ex-husband and we were moving in the direction of divorcing and we were having an argument. And I literally looked over at that piece of paper and like three of the words, or I guess four words, two separate words and a phrase started like literally like dancing off the page at me. And it was communication, acceptance, and unconditional love. And I realized in that moment when we were arguing that those three things were not present in the relationship. And not only were they not present by that point because we were coming to the end, but I realized they had never been present in the
Mhm.
relationship ever. right? And so when I talk about, for example, the masks and right, that I was wearing, many of those masks began with my relationship with him, right? So I went to school, I went to university, to college to get an art degree, to come out as a graphic designer is what I wanted to be. I came out as an accountant because of him. He had literally taken me to a starving artist fair one time and said, "This is what we're going to be." And he had pegged me as the breadwinner, the financial provider, which I ultimately became, completely responsible for putting the finances into our relationship. That started when we were dating, early when we were dating in college. And so I took off the mask that I wanted. I took off who I wanted to be, an artist, and put on a mask that he wanted me to be. Right. And so I realized, I started like rapid fire going back over my life with him. And I realized, and it wasn't just him, it was other people in my life too, who I was wearing a mask of who they wanted me to be. But I realized that I had done that because he didn't accept me and he wouldn't love me unconditionally without those changes to who I was. And I was like, and then of course we weren't communicating, right? That was clear to me. We were trying to move forward and agreeing on how we were going to separate ourselves, and the communication was terrible, right? And so I realized in that moment that those were my three core emotional needs. And actually here I am 5 years later, and I'll tell you that that learning on that day is still the truth. I learned that day, and I know even today, and I look for that as primary things that I look at in my relationships with people, right? But that is one of those things that I had to go through deep self-discovery to understand about myself. And I've talked here now about how it gets related to so many other things, right? Because you can see that now it's an identity that I took on that wasn't mine, right? And you can also see when I talked about being a busyholic and chronic chaos, right? I mean, that also manifested because I'm in a relationship with a partner who's not meeting my emotional needs, and I'm trying to mask it. I'm just trying to dissociate from it. I'm trying to escape the fact that I don't feel whole in this relationship. So what am I doing? Just creating as much chaos and busyness as I can to distract myself. So that's the type of deep self-discovery work that is critical to really be able to heal ourselves, which is about releasing those emotions that tether us, those negative fear-based emotions that tether us to all of that that's present in our life before we heal.
I'm
You
still
all right?
I'm emotional thinking about my core emotional needs.
And by the way, we could talk more about this. We could probably do a whole session on
it's a good
emotional
thing.
needs.
What actually got me going was when you started labeling yours. I was like, oh, I do know mine. I just don't acknowledge them a lot, and they're not just even in interpersonal. They're not just in romantic relationships. They're in friendships. They're
That's
in
right.
business partnerships.
That's
They're
right.
in client work. They're in all these different places. And
Yeah, I mean,
similar,
they're core to healthy relationships.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that because you in any relationship, you're 50% of it. So your
yeah.
needs need to be met. So you need to know what they are, right?
And truthfully, as somebody who spent a lot of his life in survival and unhealthy survivorship,
Mhm.
my default coping mechanism is to be a chameleon.
I can do that too. Yeah, I got that
And
one as well.
what I don't
Yeah.
know if I ever publicly acknowledge or say to people is that, you know, on the surface, the chameleon looks so happy every
Mhm.
single day. But then the moment the world disappears and I go to sleep or
Yeah.
attempt to go to sleep is when this feeling of like isolation and loneliness. And, you know, one of the questions I was going to ask you earlier, and I feel like I know the answer and it's a leading question, is that, you know, once you become aware of these needs and once you become aware of your unhealthy survivorship and your coping mechanisms, they don't magically go away. They become
Mm-mm. Oh
something
no.
we're aware of,
Yeah.
and then we evolve through them. And
Yeah.
so, you know, it's
Yeah.
not something that happens in me often anymore.
Yeah.
My relationships are great. My friendships are great.
Yeah.
I communicate my needs well, but I still find it coming up to where if something happens and it's not even trauma, it's just a desire or a need on the
Mhm.
other side, my default is I did something wrong. I need to own this. I need to apologize for this. And who do I need to be for this to not happen again?
Yeah.
And it's rare, but I'm also sharing this publicly because I know I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
and it's not talked about. And so, yeah, that's why I'm emotional on this side.
It's all right. It's good. It's
So,
healthy.
yeah, it is healthy,
Yeah.
and it leads me to a question about this because I feel like the one thing that everybody listening to this podcast or even in this conversation has in common is I would give us a label of being like entrepreneurs, which to some degree are like high achievers, right? You talked about this earlier about like this manufactured busy and
Yeah.
this go, go, go. And I'm just curious, like, what does unhealthy survivorship look like in the high achievers, like who are technically like unconscious survivors? Like,
That was me.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, I mean, it's really about achievement. I mean, because achievement is part of that being busy, right? It feeds that chaos, and we're doing what we're doing because we think we're just climbing up the corporate ladder, what society wants us to be doing, right? And I've talked about this. There's a great book out there, which I know we've talked about it before, called "The Second Mountain" by David Brooks. "The Second Mountain: Quest for a Moral Life," and he talks about people who live on First Mountain, and that's people who are that type of a person, right? Very much about serving self. And I don't mean that in a negative way, like in a narcissistic or selfish kind of way, but really we're driven by everything that society tells us that we should be doing that perpetuates this high achiever mode that we live in, and who we are as high achievers, right? And that's, you know, money and titles and houses and cars and whatever, 85 watches, whatever it is that you need to accumulate. I'm a woman, way too many pairs of shoes, right? Whatever it is, right? That kind of stuff. Um, that really feeds into, right? Being a high achiever really just perpetuates that unhealthy survivorship, because you think all you're doing is being a high achiever and performing, right? And of course, society today really promotes high achievement, right? I mean, it celebrates all of those things that we're doing as high achievers. But really, what we're doing in many capacities when we're achieving is just creating more chaos, more distraction in our life, to not focus on the reality of what's happening behind the scenes, the part that nobody ever sees. And for someone like me, the part I couldn't even see.
I didn't expect to be this emotional around this topic today. I'm going to be really honest with you and everybody listening. Um,
Let me say something. I just want to say one more thing about emotional needs, and maybe just give you a minute to pause there. But my journey with emotional needs, to identify them when I realized my primary three, and I have others that I've identified since then. But that has been a long journey. So it was probably 8 or 10 weeks getting what I would call the first breakthrough, like when those 3 finally danced on the page for me, and I could see
Mhm.
those 3 and I could understand them, and what I described to you about the very pervasive impact on my life of not getting those needs met. That took me a long time to be able to understand that and to say what I've said to you about that. The other thing that took me a really, really long time is progressing that through different relationships, right? And so I had to bring into that work the ways that I was engaging with people who were significant in my life that was really preventing us from having deep relationships. And part of that is because I was not meeting their emotional needs, right? So these are people on the other side who had their own needs, and I was sort of superficially in their lives and not really giving them what they need, right? So it was my lack of awareness around emotional needs about myself, but it extended to me being able to give that to other people. And so I've had to go through a lot of work, which was I've just had my 5-year anniversary of the what I a death and rebirth event for me, on that day. And it was probably 3 months after that, give or take 3, 6 months after that, that the emotional needs were really was on its way after I had that first breakthrough. It wasn't until the end of last year, and so another 4 years, or 3.5 years, let's say, that I could say to you, these are the qualities that I'm looking for in the man I'm going to invite into my life to be my partner. Right. And so I had to work through all of the different types of significant relationships that we have in our life. And what does that mean to show up in love in those relationships as part of my study, what I'm continuing to learn about. But emotional needs was a huge part of that and understanding where those show up. And getting to that point where I could definitively say, these are the qualities that I need in the person who's going to come into my life and hopefully be with me until the end of whichever one of us is going to go first, can meet all of these needs. And many of them are emotional needs. But I went through a long progression, particularly around that relationship, men, the significant other in my life, where I started in a place of a long list of no's. I built that list of no's even more through trial and error of dating, and then finally started to have experiences where people were coming in, and this was God. I mean, it was what I call my universe touches. Every one of these, when this started to happen, was God coming into my life and putting people in my life who were there to teach me profound lessons about what I need. And they would come in and teach me the lesson, and they would be gone. And I knew it. I would like, oh, I was like that. Okay. I see that. Great. And I knew what was happening. And so I was actively saying to the universe, to God, if this is not my person, let this person teach me what I need to learn and let them leave. And like literally the light would go out. Like literally the day that they would leave, the moment they would leave, it was like the light switch went, I'm on now. And I just went off and they were gone. And that was my signal to go, oh, learning. What did I learn from this relationship? And through probably 8 or 10 of those experiences, I was able to get to an affirmative, positive list of this is the human being that I'm looking for, right? And then that person showed up, right? About probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks after I finished it in Thanksgiving. And this person showed up before Christmas last year. I finished around Thanksgiving. So that was a very long process around a deep dive into me to know who am I and what do I need to feel whole as a human being and to have joy and peace, which is huge, and love in my life, right? A lot of work there. So identifying the emotional needs is just the beginning of that path that I went down, but critical in being able to know if I'm ever going to feel fulfilled, what is it that makes me feel that way? And I do a lot of learning. And I suspect that probably all of us who come to this place have to go through that learning. You probably have too, right? I mean, if you think about it, right, where your relationships are fulfilling for you, and maybe you're still, I know you're going through some things now. And so maybe you're still I think the nature of the different relationships that we're talking about push on different needs that we have in terms of being fulfilled. And we need all of that together from all of our relationships to be fully fulfilled. But there are people in our lives who should contribute more because we're with them more often and we're
Mhm.
more intimate with them, more vulnerable with them, right? Taking more risk in being in the relationship with them, right? And so I think that the needs are greater. More of what we need has to come from certain people in our lives in order for the relationship to work.
Yeah,
Right.
and I also, to take what you said, I feel like there's never a finish line to it,
Oh,
because
100%.
in hearing all this, right? I'm aware of my emotional needs, and
Mm,
my emotional needs, number one, having an awareness of them, and number two, working on them on my own is directly correlated to my level of success in life, happiness, joy, peace,
mm,
fulfillment, right? The things that you talk about.
mm,
But also understanding that if my emotional needs, and this is just for me personally, if they're not evolving, I'm not either.
mm,
And I'm looking at this now in this current state as a 41-year-old man going through a divorce,
mm,
navigating what now parenting looks like, and my partner who I hope to spend the rest of my life with, who I love dearly, and all these other different aspects. But my needs are drastically different than they were 2 years ago in the middle of a storm, and 4 years ago when everything seemed
yeah.
normal and fine. And that need has also changed the desire for what my business looks like and where
Mm,
I spend my time and how
mm,
I spend my time. And then, now like living with my best friend who I love dearly, and his family has also kind of changed my love languages a little bit, which I just boil down to my emotional needs
mm,
evolving.
yeah.
Um, and I love how much, and I didn't say this earlier, I also love how much you encourage and acknowledge the releasing of emotions. Because,
Mm.
even for somebody who teaches this on my side, it's so nice to be reminded and held in it. Like, for everybody listening, I'm just crying over here. And there's no reason, there's no agenda, there's no anything I have to get to. There's just a release that I know something on
Yeah.
the other side, will unlock. But I love this. I love this conversation. And so when we think about like heal, right? When we think about
Mhm.
like hope, evolve, and love,
Mhm.
what does that look like in action?
Well, th actually call it an action-packed acronym, so thanks for saying that.
You're
You
welcome.
kinda teed that up there, right? Which I don't think you even knew you were doing that, but that is what I call it
I
because
didn't know.
because it is all about action, right? And that's what I teach. I mean, I've just taken the acronym, which the acronym, I've been on this progression to reinvent myself on my second mountain, going back to my reference to David Brooks' book, which is about being in service to others in some capacity, right? Which is what I do now and finding a lot of fulfillment and knowing that's what my purpose is to serve other people. But that's been a journey for me as well. And I went through my own experience where realizing that I'd done a lot in action with hope, with evolving, and then now in learning to love and showing up in love. Really, not so much learning to love anymore, but how do you show up in love in different relationships, which I'm still going through. But that gave way to the acronym and the way that I think about what it means to heal, right? And so it's a skill set, right? That's what you're learning to do, right? And you go through, for me, and I think this happens for all of us, once we come to the precipice, the point when we're like, enough, right? We've suffered so much, whatever your rock bottom is, right? For me, my rock bottom was that hypnotherapy event. When I came back
Mhm.
to conscious awareness, and I'm like, holy shit, I have no idea who I am, right? And I like this most terrifying experience where certain events of my life cohesed together and I realized what they meant, including a 15-year recurring nightmare that I'd been having at that point in time that I had no idea why I was having it, right? And so now, and it's tied back to the sexual abuse I experienced as a child, right? And so, which I didn't become aware of until I was 35. Then I didn't have my first live memory of that event until I was 35. Then I have this recurring nightmare for 15 years. Then I go into this hypnotherapy event and I have no idea any of this is going to happen. And all these things in my life that have been occurring suddenly go whoop, right? It's like, I mean, like literally sucking together, like, those toys you have there, kids have, that your son's right. It's in the ball and it like spans out and comes in. That's what this was. It was fully expanded and just like rushing together. And now it all fits together. And I'm like, oh, that's what that means. Right. And so that is what I call that my rock bottom moment. And I think all of us who heal for the first time, like really heal, we get there in some way. People obviously think about rock bottom a lot in terms of addiction or alcoholism or homelessness or, being on the street, that kind of thing. Right. But I think each of us has our own unique rock bottom when we're going to get to that place when we're ready to heal. So we do it the first time. It's deeply painful, excruciatingly painful. I will also tell you that it's the most exquisite thing I've ever been through in my life. What I've experienced is profound. I'm deeply grateful for what I've experienced, but it sucked, right? Going through it the first time.
By the
But
way, hold on. I love you to pieces. I love you to pieces. I'm so glad we are friends. I'm like over here bawling my eyes out.
you just need to release. It's all
But
good. Release whatever it is.
there's even clarity hitting me. And not even personally, but like to add
Beautiful.
texture to what you're saying,
Yeah, that's
to add
beautiful.
texture to
Good.
what you're saying
Yeah.
for people, the emotional rock bottom, right? Like I love the way that you talk about this,
Good.
right? Like I hear this term rock bottom and I feel like everybody gets this like view in their brain where it's like this big catastrophic thing, or it looks like
Yeah.
everything around you is collapsing.
Yeah.
And because of that, people almost get stuck looking for that to happen.
Yeah.
And I feel like sharing the fact that I think rock bottom can be as simple as a little pebble that doesn't feel good, or a
100%.
series of pebbles
100%.
that doesn't feel good, that allows us to open a door into, and the reason I'm saying this right now is because I'm crying my eyes out, because I feel like what that exquisite feeling that you're talking about is the feeling that comes on the release of the
Yes.
feeling. It
Yeah.
comes on the other side.
Yes. That's
And
right.
so like this just felt like a break the fourth wall moment for everybody. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
That's okay.
if you're listening to this, and you're like, I haven't had my rock bottom. I don't think rock bottom is one boulder. I
Yeah,
think it's a series of mini pebbles, medium pebbles, and large pebbles, and sometimes boulders that lead you to this place to recognize that the finish line is being fully released
yeah,
and allowing those feelings without judgment, without questions,
that's right.
without fault, blame, guilt, or shame to get to the feeling on the other side
Mhm.
and then start exploring with hope and evolving and action because I didn't expect in this conversation today to talk about emotional needs, which I know about and I teach and I talk to people about, to then be like, I don't know mine. I'm like, no, no, I do know mine, but they're evolving. And this week I faced a challenging situation where I had had a mask on and I was operating in fear.
Mhm.
And then you're talking about this continual journey. And I was like, oh, I stopped picking up my pebbles or looking for my pebbles intentionally, and a few of them accidentally started to clog the drain again.
Yes,
And then as you're talking
yes.
about it, I'm like, I don't even know why I'm crying, but it's just coming out. And so I just had to share that.
Well, I go through this too, right? And I mean, and this is where the action comes in, right? Because I say that, the first time that you actually do it, you actually go through a true healing process. It is painful, but it's exquisite. You're done for the life previous to that point in time. But we're still human beings. And
Mhm.
our very existence is predicated on the fact that we are also social beings, right? I mean, our lives are about human to human interaction. And because of that, we're still going to experience pain and hurts. And so what you're doing with the action of learning how to have hope and build hope and maintain hope, use it as fuel in your life to heal, learning how to evolve. What tools do I need? What resources resonate with me uniquely to be able to heal, right? I mean, everybody has their set of things that they use or should be using, whether they're traditional, they are trauma therapy, they are EMDR, meditation, you run, you box, you do art therapy, you sing, dance, whatever it is, right? We all have our own unique combination of resources. Alternative therapies. I just have started family constellations work, which was amazing. I just did my first
Mhm.
experience with that. All different ways that we are going about healing, the tools, right? And then how do we put those together to really then do the deep excavation work, the deep self-discovery work, and that is action as well. Let me find out who I am. I'm going to take off all these masks and figure out who I actually am inside of me. And there's all different ways that we can do that. And then the act of showing up in love, that is also action, right? So all of it is about building an active skill set to be able to heal more quickly. You become more resilient. So over time, as you move forward and you experience new interactions that are painful, you can move past them in a more healthy way and more quickly. And that's what you're experiencing right now. I've been experiencing it with my dad, right?
100%.
I'm going through this with my father right now, right? And I've done all this amazing work to heal some really difficult relationships. And now the relationship with my dad is up. And we're working
Mhm.
on that. I'm actively working on it. It's painful sometimes, right? And I am crying. I mean, I've had this, over Father's Day.
Yeah.
I put a post out about this right after Father's Day. Like literally, I realized about a week after Father's Day, I had literally completed the entire cycle of grief, all the 7, 8, how many ever stages you want to say there are in grief, in 2 days. I'd gone through
Mhm.
it in 48 hours and I was back to this me. But in those 48 hours, I was in the place that you've just been a little bit like, I just need to get this out. I'm feeling it. It's happening, right? That's
Yeah.
that's about being a human. You
Yeah.
don't
And I
heal and
think,
go, "Oh, I'm done," right? It's over with,
well,
right?
and I think that the reason I say that, I'm glad you said that, is that's common, that there's a finish line.
No,
And I'm like, the finish line you don't want because there's no more breath in your lungs when you hit that
that's
finish line.
100% true. That is the finish line when you're no longer on this earth. That's right.
And, God
Yep.
bless, I'll spend eternity with him in the glory parts of heaven, but this is a part of it. It even talks about it
Yeah.
biblically. I mean,
Yeah.
it's we talk about how, they don't prune the dead branches. They prune the most fruitful branches so that they produce bigger and bigger fruit. And I think the part that you nailed that I want to call out for everybody is it's active.
Hmm.
It's active. It's not sitting. It's not wallowing. It's not being ashamed. It's not me being like, hey, Beth, we have to end the podcast. I can't do this anymore. It's like, hey, everyone's about to witness George being a ball and a puddle right now. And it's allowing that process to go, because I think the point that you talked about, it's just like anything in life. And this is a really silly analogy, but the first time you ever cook following a recipe is drastically different than the 100th time you've used that recipe. You get faster at it, you prep
Yes.
different, you can respond to situations differently. Like that's what the healing journey looks like.
Right.
And so it's a muscle. And then I found is that if you're not
Mhm.
actively pursuing ones to heal, they're going to find you with a lot more pain than if you actively pursued them. And so
That's a
I
great way to say it.
yeah,
Yes.
100%. Like, well, you and I were talking about avoidance, right? And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
if no matter what the p it's still in the box and we know the
Mm.
box is there.
Mhm.
And no matter how many times I go like this, I'm like, I'm not responding to that text. I'll do it next week. I'll do it here. There's this old adage of like, when the envelope shows up, open it
Yeah.
and just handle it, right? And just do one envelope at a time, because filing it away is just stacking
Yes.
this stuff that gets in the
Yes.
way.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I love the way that you described it. So I want to ask about this, because
Mm.
I see healing thrown around as like this term of like, oh, it's just this term, right? Or I'm just healed, or I don't have to do this work. But I feel like you nailed it, that like we are human beings, and this is a part of being a human being that's kind of been processed out societally or
Mm.
accidentally through this like false connection of being online. But
Yeah.
I'm curious for you, when you think about this, what is like the healing action or insight that you believe is like essential for everybody to partake in, but everybody's resisting in this moment? And maybe not everybody, but most people.
I think the self-discovery work is what prevents a lot of people from healing, because we are wired, and so many people are looking at the other person in an interaction, right? They're looking at what the other person did to me, did to them, right? And playing the victim, laying blame. And it's not until you really turn inward and look at your own contributions, right? Because in many cases, the pain that we're experiencing, and I'm not talking about, um, there some of the pain that we experience, that we go through, we're bringing on ourselves, right? So you think even about staying in an abusive relationship, right? By not making the choice to exit that relationship, we're perpetuating that trauma on ourselves, right? Now, so I feel like in order to really be in a place where we're more healed, I'm more healed, I had to spend a lot of time looking inward and learning about me. And one of the primary things I had to learn about me is who I am and where am I vulnerable to get myself
Mhm.
into these situations again, right? And I'm thinking now about, the relationship with my ex-husband, which was a very long relationship. And I've done a lot of work to understand how I got in that relationship and why I stayed so long. And that's all focused on me, because I don't want to do that again for either one of us, right? Because the end was painful. And he lived with one person who he thought I was, the person who I was creating, the masks I was wearing. That was a real person to him. That was the person that he had built a relationship with. That's the person who he probably loved in his own way. And when I started to become myself, who I really am, and take those masks off, it freaked him out.
Mhm.
And he was like, I don't know who you are anymore, right? Because and yes, for me, I had become a much more healthy person and I was becoming me, but that was deeply painful for him and his whole world turned upside down, right? And so I don't want to do that in the future. I don't want to do that in any relationship. And so understanding me, who I am, what I need, how I got to be the person who I am is critical to healing. And so much of it is inner work, right? And any work that I've done, well, I'll tell you the work that I've done around the other people who have hurt me. And there are five primary people in my life who have hurt me deeply, that have really caused me uh, to live in the unhealthy places that I was living. And every one of them, I have done the work now to where I have grace for and acceptance of them as survivors themselves, which, every single one of us is a survivor. We've all had some sort of an interaction that has been painful to us, right? This is why I don't like to talk about trauma or traumas, right? Because I look at it in the context of pain that I'm carrying because of an interaction. And it could be something significant, like being abused by my grandfather when I was sexually abused by him when I was 5 years old, to just a caustic interaction that I had with my husband over, I don't know, moving a cattle panel. I'm carrying it one way and he's
Okay.
carrying it another, and we're not on the same page. And he shoots me a dirty look or says something that's painful to me, right? So I'm talking about the full gamut of where pain comes from, right? Which is why I don't like to talk about trauma, because to me, all of that is trauma in some way, right? That, when I realized that about me, that is true about every other single human being on this planet. And my deep work to understand myself as a survivor allows me to see those people, and I'm now focused on the 5 who I mentioned who have hurt me the most. I see them only, primarily and only, as survivors, right? So I've been able to take the label off of who they are, the role assigned to them, my grandfather, my father, my husband. And then there were 2 that were uh, different labels. I can take those roles off, the expectations that come with those roles. And I work at it. I mentioned I'm still working on the relationship with my father, but I get to a place where I first and foremost see them as a survivor. If I'm a survivor, they're a survivor. The things that
Mm,
I do, the way I live my life in unhealthy ways, they have the same right. That's what they do too. That's what survivors do, right? It's that inward look that's the hard part about really being able to move forward, because so often we're looking at the other person. Well, he did this to me. She did this to me. They're this, they're that. Okay, great. Why? Because they're a survivor, right? If they go through a healing process, you're going to see the real person who they are. And it's not the person you probably encountered. You're encountering somebody who's suffering a lot of pain in their life. And that's what's showing up in their interaction with you and the way they treated you. Not because they're an inherently bad person or just mean or evil or just want to hurt you. More than likely, they have lived a life of suffering and they're still in their suffering, or were in their suffering when they hurt you.
mm,
And you can't get to that place unless you see yourself that way first, which is that's the reason to do the deep self-discovery work, to figure out who you are so you can live as who you are, but
yeah.
also to accept yourself as a survivor, right? And so I'm no longer beholden, I'm no longer embarrassed by the fact that I tried really hard. I spent a lot of times in drugs and alcohol. I'm no longer embarrassed to say that. I'm
Hmm.
no longer like weirded out myself about having to have a conversation with you, George, about how does your memory work? Like, when you go back and think about your high school graduation, what's happening? Like, are you replaying a movie in your, oh, bad example, when you got married? Are you
Hmm.
replaying a movie in your head when you got married? Like, how does that, right? This is the kind of conversation I would have been having with you 10 years ago. Well, I don't need to have that conversation anymore. And I mean, okay, it is what it is, right? It's all because I've done the work to understand who I am first,
Yeah.
right, as a survivor. And then I can see everybody else that way. And it sort of takes some of the sting. It's the last step for me before I know I'm going to be able to release the emotions, the
Hmm.
unhealthy fear-based emotions that I'm carrying about someone who's hurt me. It's the last
Hmm.
step for me when I know I'm going to be able to release it.
Hmm. Yeah, I want to summarize as we start to like get near landing this plane, but
Because we could
what
talk for a long time in
we
the air. You
we
know
we
that.
could, but what I also, an undertone in all of this, I think one of the greatest gifts for quote unquote healing, and also I used to have this like negative connotation with the word survivor, but I don't anymore. You just
Yeah.
replace it with whatever
Yeah.
empowers you, thriver or embody
Whatever.
or overcomer. Joseph
Yeah.
Campbell calls it the hero's journey. That
Yeah.
is no different than survivorship. um but I think the undertone of a lot of this is like one of the greatest tools that we have in this is perspective,
Hmm.
and that perspective doesn't come from isolation. And the easiest way to basically start this self discovery process is to be around other people or tools or modalities or resources that
100%.
are
Yeah.
in that same vein or
Yes.
path, which
Yes.
I think this is a perfect time because I know your book and I've been on your podcast and I know what you do. And I also know you have a master class coming up
Mm.
on this. And I would love it for you to share because I think community is probably the one place that I see people resisting growth the most is showing up inauthentic in community instead of authentically
Yeah.
themselves, like
Yeah.
crying on a podcast with Beth,
Yes.
just letting it all go and be like,
Let it all
here's
out,
where I was. And
right?
I had that too.
Yeah.
Right. So I
Yeah.
would love for you to share kind of like, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, holy moly, I'm coping. I'm in X, I'm in Y. Like, where do they start? Where's the best place for them to go? How do they go?
Well, I'm going to pivot off the one thing that you just said about being social and community and connecting with people, right? So the place to start is talking. And that's where I
Mm,
started, right? So finding someone who you can begin the journey of releasing what's inside of you, right? And that is, don't hold it inside anymore, right? And releasing it to yourself is good, but talking to other people, finding the right people is um, definitely a first step to take. Um, I have tried to I've tried to build things as I'm reinventing myself as the healing mentor, moving away from what I used to do into what I'm meant to actually be doing. Trying to create things that are really going to be deeply beneficial to people. When I wrote my book, it is my story about this journey that I went through. I mentioned before the Heal framework came out of that. So you can go read my story about my journey, right? Which is great. Reading other survivors' stories is a huge way that we heal, right? So you can go read my story and take whatever you take from reading the book. I've also, built community and am building that community. So I do have a private Facebook community that you can get to through my website. You can get to the book through my website as well. And that in that community, one of the reasons that I built it is because I have a very public face, as we do when we're trying to get our message out to people, right? Broadly, we do it through social media. But there are things that I want to be able to share with my community where they can actually see healing in action, what I'm going through on a regular basis. And this thing that we're talking about, I live it every day because I
mhm,
have human to human interactions. And so I share a lot more. It's like I call it a video journal that I post in there on a regular basis. So it is like I'm writing in my journal, but I'm just recording a
mm,
video and putting it out there for community, right? And would like to encourage more activity, and I think that'll happen as it grows. It's a new community, but as it grows, more people will actively participate in sharing their own journey, right? But I'm trying to lead by example, right? Because this is how we do it. This is the reality of it. So the community is there. I have my show, right? Let's Heal with Beth Jones, which I have my own YouTube channel, which I'm going to come onto my website and my social media handle in just a minute. But the show is all about. It's called Let's Heal for a reason. That's what I focus on is healing. And you get three types of guests. You get me with my stories. I bring on other survivors that tell their story about their healing journeys. And I bring on people who provide us with the tools and resources and modalities that help us to progress, right? And I traditional ones, and then I'm always trying alternative ones. So I
mhm,
give everybody just to hear about different options that are out there, right? And I like to have had an experience with it. So quite often we'll talk about my experience, and they've all progressed me. And so, I talk about it, right? To give people an inside view on how it's worked. A lot of times people cross the two, right? I mean, this, we have a lot of people who have their own healing story that go on to share their stories or their gift, right? Which you do, I do, a lot of people out there. So sometimes they'll cross over, right? So that's what the show's about. Um, and then I've just completed and just written a master class, which my first cohort will begin on July 17th. So this may air afterward, but you can
this
get in
will
on
air
the second
after.
one, but you can
Yeah.
get in on the second one because it's not going anywhere. But it is a deep dive. It is the master class is building that skill set. So it's built around the Heal framework. It's teaching you the skill set. So some of the things that we've been talking about today, it's a deep dive on that for yourself. And so I take people through that process of how to build this skill set that then they will be able to hone and use in the future.
Mm,
And there's a couple of other, there's a video out there where I talk about the framework, sort of at a high level where you can hear more about it, that I, share with people. I sometimes do live events around that where you can,
mhm.
watch it and then spend time with me in a Q&A and just kind of ask me anything you want to about it. So, there's different ways to different ways to connect and hear my message and what I'm trying to get people to learn how to do is to heal. So, because we all
Yeah.
can be in this place of, thriving, right? So
Yeah.
the ways to find me, so my website is empoweredsurvivors.com, and you can find all of those things that I just mentioned through my website. And my social media handle across all of the platforms is at Beth Jones Healing Mentor. And so either of those, you can find me. Yeah,
And
I love
we'll
that.
make sure we link all that in the show notes.
Thank you.
And I think, at minimum, everybody just go check out our website, but find her on a platform that resonates with you. And if anything in this conversation tickled, landed, or you happen to be crying your entire way through it, like I was, then we celebrate that. But,
We do celebrate that. It's a good thing.
connection, right? Connect with Beth, connect in her community. If anything in here supports you, I think the
Yeah.
more that we all fall in love with this process, the easier the process becomes. And I've realized that when you surround yourself with other people who do this work, what used to feel uncomfortable now feels exciting because I'm like, oh, this is how
Yes.
it's supposed to be the whole time. Like,
100%.
it, like we even know this biblically for
Yes.
me and you as like
Yes.
people of faith. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, this is like a part of it. Like he tells me to wring out my heart. He basically tells me to crucify myself every day. I'm like, oh, you mean explore myself?
Yes.
And okay, got it. Okay,
Mhm.
got it. Right.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that, the power of this comes in the power of community, but also I think the way that I would land this plane is that this is, in my opinion, what expressive self love looks like.
Mm.
Self love is this active pursuit of knowing oneself, of
Yeah.
finding those needs, healing those needs,
Yeah.
flexing the muscle of healing, making adjustments as needed, but staying in the pursuit of it, I believe, is what or
Mm.
how I would define self love.
Yes.
And
I agree.
I love the way that you break it down. I love the heal, and I love all the conversations and the perspectives that we had for people listening. And I think the invitation for everybody listening is to just take one thing. Maybe you've never asked yourself, like, what are your emotional needs? What is it that brings you peace and joy and
Mhm.
love, right? Or,
Mhm.
oh, maybe I do know them, but I've never articulated those to my best friend. I've never told my partner that. I've never mentioned this to the people I'm here. I've never shared it with a client. I don't know. It
Mm.
it it really intuitively is up to you, but I think that there's something for everybody in
Yeah.
this episode to kind of take action on. So Beth, I just wanted to say thank you. I know we could do this for
Mm,
like
my pleasure.
22 hours
We
in a
could.
row. Because we did the same thing on your show, and I'm
Yes.
sure we'll do more in the future. But I
Yeah.
just wanted to say thank you. Thank you, number one, for I'm going to throw a term out there, holding space for me and just allowing
You're
me to
welcome.
cry and
Oh,
feel.
it's my pleasure.
Um,
Yeah.
but also for sharing so authentically and so vulnerably that like allowed that expression to come out.
Mm.
And walking the walk, talking the talk, being here to support people, be an example, being vulnerable and authentic, and sharing your story. Like it's incredible. So I'm like grateful for you coming.
I'm very grateful to have been here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm very, very happy to know you. Glad we're
Yeah.
friends.
Ditto, ditto,
Yeah.
ditto, ditto, ditto.
Yeah.
So for everybody listening, this would be my gentle nudge to go check out Beth, go find
Thank
Beth,
you.
go connect with Beth, go do your thing. Because I
Yeah.
don't know how, if you made it this far, something didn't resonate. Something had to resonate. Given the amount of tickles I had in my nervous system today, something had to resonate. And so I'm going to send you all the love. I'm going to send you all the well wishes. So everybody have the most beautiful day.
Yes.
Check out Beth, reach out to
Thank
Beth.
you.
All the stuff's in the
Thank
show
you.
notes,
Thank you.
empoweredsurvivors.com. Beth
Mhm.
Jones. Is her name. You will find her everywhere. And then bonus, and we might link this in the show notes. I was on her show too, so you can
Yes.
hear a different perspective and you can hear roles
Yes, which is
reversed.
a great
So
episode. It's really awesome.
it was good. It was
Yeah.
good. I
Yeah.
remember it vividly. So for everybody, have a beautiful day. Remember that relationships will always beat algorithms, and today would be the nail in the coffin, especially the one
100%.
with yourself. And
Yes.
and have a beautiful day and God bless. So thank you, everybody.